Welcome to Clubs Made Meaningful from Susner. This is a show about building clubs that people love, where strategy, culture, and brand come together to create real belonging. Let's dive in. Today, we are excited to talk with James Cronk, co-founder of Guru Collective and the creator of Golf Industry Guru, which is an online learning platform that helps golf operations around the world build stronger teams through better training. James has a career of over 25 years in senior leadership roles at some of Canada's finest clubs and resorts. He now works with both private clubs and public golf facilities, giving him a unique perspective on what private clubs can learn from the public golf world when it comes to team training and employee engagement. Public golf operations have to compete for every round, every guest, every dollar. They've had to get really good at building cultures where exceptional service isn't optional. And those lessons translate directly to how private clubs can strengthen their own teams and member experiences.
I'm really interested in, as we have this conversation, your career path, just to start. So we've never met. And so like this conversation is fresh for me, which I really like. And it seems like from my understanding, you had senior leadership roles at a bunch of different clubs and resorts within Canada. And then you founded the Guru Collective, which we'll get into, and then the Golf Industry Guru. So talk me through that journey. Like, give me an understanding of where have you come from, and then what led you to focus on team training and development? Like, that's a very interesting angle.
You know, it started back, to be honest, when I was skipping classes in university. I worked at a golf club, and I was when I also going to university, I was an actor. And I like to say that the best role that I had as an actor was that as a janitor, because that's what paid the rent, because I was a terrible actor and couldn't get work. But I worked for a great restaurant company in North America called Earl's Restaurants. And that was kind of my first start. And they are still today they are a behemoth of a restaurant organization, $1 billion organization. And I learned some great things from them. But when I was about 28 years old, I wanted to become a golf professional. So there was two gentlemen in Vancouver, British Columbia, where I live, that were known to be the best in the business. And so I waited until one of them gave me a job. I guess I kind of knew in the very beginning that if you work for great people, it's the most important thing to help yourself, is to have great mentors. And so I ended up working for both of them over my young career. And that's where I said, I guess that's where I learned the importance of people. I mean, the reality is that we're in the people business, and I learned a lot of best practices from some very smart people about the importance of creating culture, the importance of creating a great work environment, how to find great people, how to get rid of poor people. And I learned those principles really early. So I had this great job. I managed I worked in private clubs, daily fee clubs, ended up managing a resort facility. And when it became time for me to leave there, I thought there's no better job that I'm going to find. So I'm going to go on my own. So I guess 18 years ago, I became a consultant, and it's been feast or famine ever since. Cronk Group is my consulting company, and we work with clubs of all different types. I do everything from strategic planning and governance work to motivational presentations to staff. And then my business partner and I, Scott Massey, I have known Scott since he was 17. He is the reason for most of my success, if you want to call any of it success, because he's the guy that gets all the work done. We started Guru Collective a handful of years ago with Golf Industry Guru, and now we offer some other platforms as well, all around people. To be honest, it's all around managing risk, developing people. The whole importance of your culture, and no matter what type of facility you are. So it's a lot of fun. As you guys know, this is a great business that we're in, and we are in the people business. So having a great culture or finding a way to get a great culture is critically important if you want to find success.
How many times have you worked with a club or a course or any of those different facilities, or maybe just an organization in which their culture is unique to them and they struggle with new people coming in and trying to put their own culture onto it? We work with a lot of clubs in which they have a certain culture, but they hire people from the industry. And the industry has this sense of, oh, well, I did this here, and so I'm just going to bring that to you. And how big of a challenge is it for you to get over that kind of road speed bump, I'd say?
Lots of clubs don't have a definition of what their culture is. They haven't defined. Sometimes they have a culture identified about what they're trying to deliver for their members, but that's different than what you're trying to deliver for your team.
Yes.
What's your employee culture is different than your service culture. We want to be fast. We want to deliver high end, exceptional experiences. We want to make sure that the food is fresh and blah, 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 blah. They've got all these objectives to deliver an experience for the membership, but they haven't clarified, if you're a manager in our club, this is the expectation we have of how you treat people, how you manage people. If you're going to work at our club, here's your ROI. I like to say, you have to clearly identify what is the ROI that your people are going to get. So, and I think to answer your question, Tucker, it starts at the top, right? It starts at leadership. A general manager, a CEO, he or she, has to be really clear about what kind of culture they're trying to create, and then ensure that the onboarding process and all the various different tools and tricks that they have to create that culture within their people, I think has some consistency. If you're on a losing team, the reason why you're bringing a new coach is to get a winning team. And that new coach brings in their leadership philosophy, their culture, their expectations. And so how do you get that message down to 50 or 100 or 150 or 200 people? And how do you, what are the ways you make that happen? So we often work with clubs to help them define their culture and then to put tools in place so that they can deliver that and they can consistently, right? Which is the challenge that we have when you're in the service business, right?
James, you work with both private clubs and public golf facilities, from destination resorts to daily fees to member organizations. From your perspective, when it comes to people, what are some of the biggest differences from how a public golf operation runs or thinks about culture compared to how a private facility addresses the same thing?
Yeah. No, that's a great question. And it's also, I think it's a real thing, because in my experience, you do find that if you were broken before COVID and you didn't have a waiting list, your members were unhappy, you didn't have a capital reserve fund, or you didn't have a full tee sheet if you're a public golf course. If you haven't done a whole bunch of drastic different things in the last 5 years, you're still broken. If you haven't made your service better, your sales better, your amenities better, your product better, your marketing better, et cetera, the 21% increase you've experienced was caused by a pandemic. So think back to those days and think back to the competitiveness that existed to try to get business. Unfortunately, the golf business thought that discounting is one of the ways to accomplish that, but let's put that aside, right? So the difference sometimes, I would say, Derek, is that the pros and cons of private versus public is that in public, you have to earn that customer's visit every single time. And so you have to develop a relationship with them, a quality, experience with them, an expectation with them, to create a fan. You have got to create a raving fan every time that they want to put over their $100 to choose your public golf course. When you're at a private club, they're coming back tomorrow whether they like it or not. They have joined your community, your culture, your club, and that creates a whole other, first of all, level of expectations. I am here forever. And if I have a bad experience 3 times in a row, I am not going to put up with that for the next 25 years. So sometimes in the private club world, you can get a little laissez-faire. It can become a little bit more of, we don't have to earn that guest's appreciation because they've got a food and beverage minimum and they got to spend it anyway. And so, let's just try to keep ourselves from having fires. And to do that, sometimes it becomes, we don't want to rock the boat. And this is one of the reasons why it's very difficult sometimes in the private club world to create significant change, because change is difficult. People resist change. People don't like change. And if you're going to take Mr. Smith's bar stool away from him and put a new booth in there, he's going to lose his mind. And so it's often easier to not create that experience. It's often easier just to leave things the way they're going. And unfortunately, that creates complacency. And ultimately, that's the reason why general managers don't last longer than 4 years on average at a club, because at some point the members are going to rise up and find, or the GM is going to rise up and say, I'm fed up with Mr. Smith, or I'm fed up with the board telling me how to make French fries. And so you get into conversations in the private club world that you would never get into in the public space. The public space, if you want to change the French fries, you change the French fries.
When you look at, it's really interesting to me to talk about the public versus private, and you're talking about it from the acquisition of customers, right? That's a huge difference. I also think about it in terms of acquisition of team members too, is that it's a very different working condition to say we're going to work at a public facility versus a private facility. And then even furthermore, the relationships that private club staff members have with private club members puts a whole nother layer into this. I'm going to call it leverage. We've worked with plenty of clubs who go, well, we can't do anything about the way that bartender works because everyone loves him and we have no control over him. And that's just how it is. And so how do you build a culture in that world in which it can all shift based on relationships, and you can't build something in which you go, they can leave and that's totally fine. How do you find that challenge something that can be overcome, whether you're public or private?
Yeah, you're bang on. You're bang on with that assessment, and it's one of the great things that you get that opportunity in a private club to develop those relations and to have long-term staff that know exactly what Mr. and Mrs. Smith want when they come in every Thursday morning for coffee, right? I know that Mr. Smith likes his coffee black and Mrs. Smith likes 2 cream and 2 sugar. When you have a revolving door of employees and Mr. and Mrs. Smith have to every week tell someone new, this is how I've been having my coffee for 17 years. Could someone please train you and tell you that this is how I like my coffee? Or you're not using your POS system and your technology to train your people that these are what our members are and this is what they like. You're missing that opportunity. So first of all, there's a great opportunity in the private club space. Think about how many times this happens when you sit in a restaurant, because I can tell you it's the most important thing that should happen when you go into a restaurant is the question of why are you here? Did you just finish your round of golf? Are you here for your anniversary lunch? Are you here to spend your food and beverage minimum? Are you about to go play in 25 minutes? Because if your answer is one of those 4 things, the experience that I should be delivering for you is different, is drastically different. With in addition to all the basics, right? But it's going to lead that service experience. And so in the private club space, you have that opportunity to really develop that understanding, that preference, that relationship. Then, however, when you have that bartender that's stealing booze out the back door or is, watching hockey games on television instead of the golf channel because they're bored and they've been working there for 15, 20 years, that's when leadership has difficult decisions to understand that their responsibility is to the long-term viability and wealth of that club. No individual should get in the way of that objective. And you will always hear from the 10%. The 10% will always be the loudest. I can't believe you let go, Stephen. Well, I hear you, Mr. Smith. You're totally correct. But we have been working with Stephen and giving him every opportunity over the last 12 months to stop watching television and taking booze out the back door. We've warned him. We wrote him up. We went through the law. We had all these conversations. We've given him one final chance. And guess what? This is what happened. So transparency, communication. And then Mr. and Mrs. Smith have got to realize that your responsibility is to run a business. Because if you were a private restaurant owner and you had a bartender like that, I can assure you, you would not let that continue. If you owned your own restaurant, when we talk about it about having to have an investor mindset when you are working in the private club business, you have to look at every decision like it is your business, not that you just have your members' dues to decide whether you spend it on bunker sand or on an irrigation project, right? You have to look at everything like I own this business, and then make decisions accordingly. And that's one of the reasons why it's difficult to improve a negative culture in the private club space sometimes, because those are hard decisions, and leaders often don't want to make hard decisions. As consultants, when we go and fix a business, we're hired to go fix broken businesses. I can assure you the first thing that happens is we get rid of the bad people, the negative people, the people that are, entitled, the people that are not accountable, the people that don't show up, the people that are dragging the team down, right? So there's no reason why it would be any different in a private club than it is in a public club, but we tend to be a little bit more worried about the 10%, because the 10% in a private club are really loud, and they're really influential, and they could cost me my job. And sometimes it's easier just to put your head in the sand.
So when you talk about difficult leadership questions, we worked with a couple of clubs that would consider themselves semi-private. So they straddle this line where one, for example, is a very high end, maybe one of the highest end public golf facilities in its area, commands a premium price, but also has a relatively substantial membership. So more than patron card holders, these people are called members. They feel like members. The members want a private club experience, however, at a fraction of what it would cost them to join a completely private facility. But the bulk of the business operation is dependent on these very high-end daily fee courses. And they struggle with this service aspect of how do we treat the members versus how do we treat the guests, and what are the appropriate expectations? I think my question for you is, can a club successfully do both? Can they straddle that line and have the best of both worlds? Or ultimately, would they be better off choosing to be totally private or totally public?
I think they totally can straddle that line. I used to manage a real estate resort property that in Western Canada that was considered to be the high end daily fee resort with a membership that you combine together, and the pros and cons of that. I think you totally can 100%. I think that it with any club, it has to come down, in my humble opinion, to ensuring that you're very clear on your why and your purpose. Like what are we in the business to do? What keeps us going? What is our viable business model that is going to keep paying the bills for the next 2 decades or 3 decades, and whatever that looks like. And let's just say what that looks like is a balance between daily fee and membership. Well, then it's setting expectations to your guests and customers about what they're going to get for what they pay and what they buy. I think right now we have this opportunity, and we're very afraid to take our prices up in the golf business. Where our prices have not been rising to the same level of inflation and costs. When a golf cart has gone up 25% since the pandemic, these things are going to hurt us eventually, because we have to put as much money in the piggy bank as we possibly can. So, whether it's a variety of pricing strategies, whether it's a variety of messaging, whether it's different levels of service experience, I think these are all things that good communication, good presentation, good delivery can, and once again, setting expectations. We end up making decisions or thinking that we are making decisions based on the knowledge that we have, yet we are not going out and getting enough knowledge to make effective decisions. Whether it's benchmarking, whether it's data comparisons, whether it's feedback from our guests and our customers, feedback from our employees, 360 reviews, we are not doing enough to gather the data to make the best decision. What we often end up doing through no intention is listening to the 10%.
When you write that book on the top 10%, please let me know, because I'll be first in line to read that. I think that's a fascinating topic. It's one that, we run up against in every single project that we work with. You and I met about a year and a half or 2 years ago at the Golf Inc. conference. And I think you were there representing Golf Industry Guru and all of the online training content that you've created underneath an entire platform. I believe there's several hundred hours of content on this now.
Mm-hmm.
Along the work that you've done, what was it that made you realize the industry needed this? And I'm curious how much of that training content applies to the team and the staff, and how much of that is helping you help clubs with those board members and that 10% of the loud membership that we're talking about.
Yeah. No, great. Way back when I was a manager of a club, we were recognized as having the 5th best customer service in North America by Golf Digest. And our employees rated us as being one of the best employers in our province. And a bunch of other GMs called me up and said, "Hey, like, what are you doing? Like, what's so special about you guys?" And I had no idea. We had, I don't know. I was like, what is our secret sauce? And so I started thinking about that, and that led me to become kind of a speaker. So for the last 20 years, I've been traveling around the world, giving presentations, mostly about people, culture. And I would go to these events and I would hear all these great speakers and all these great people, like brilliant gurus, the Greg Pattersons of the world, the Mike Holtzmans of the world, the Melissa Hansons of the world, all these wonderful experts in their field. And there'd be 100 people in the room. And I thought to myself, why aren't there 500 people in this room? And how can I bottle this up and make money at it? And that led into Golf Industry Gurus. So I go and find gurus and I get them to give me their content, whether it's a podcast, whether it's a webinar, whether it's a best practice, whether it's a template, whether it's an article. I always say this. I've never understood how a club will budget 50 grand for bunker sand and they won't budget $5,000 for training their 150 employees. It's unbelievable to me. Makes no sense to me. And so, first of all, we made our platform $1,000. Like, we made it ridiculously inexpensive so that price was, we thought we'd take over the world one club at a time, right? So we moved price from the issue. But we have everything on there, from beverage cart training courses to, I'm leadership development courses to how to communicate better, how to use a knife properly, how to be safe. I mean, there's as you can imagine, the topics are never ending. What we do now, to be honest, because of technology, when we started that 5 years ago, 10 years ago, you couldn't have afforded to do it. I couldn't have done it because technology wasn't to the point where anyone like me in a room and in my kitchen could make a platform like that. Nowadays, we make customized white label training videos for golf clubs that, with talking head avatars and 4 different languages, because of AI and technology. So now we make training videos without, a $40,000 a week film crew. So the opportunity to train people has never been easier. It's never been more important. Every single conference that I go to, every single conference organizer that I speak with, when I say, "What does your committee want to hear about?" they say, finding, training, managing, and motivating people. That's the number one challenge that what private club or public club in a downtown city or in the boonies, wherever you might be located. It is a very difficult topic these days. And there's lots of resources out there, whether it's us or anybody else. There's lots of resources out there to help people manage whatever of those things that they might be challenged with. So Golf Industry Guru is our training platform for clubs where every employee gets access to that training. And I always say to a GM, you don't need 150 people to go on there 3 hours a week. First of all, I hope you have a management meeting once a month. And then at that meeting, on the agenda, just put Golf Industry Guru down. And every manager needs to come to that meeting with one idea that they've learned from some expert in some field that they're going to implement in their department that's going to improve the member or guest experience, improve the employee experience, or make the club more money. And at the end of the year, if you got 8 managers, you got 100. You can't tell me that out of those 100 suggestions, you haven't paid for the $12.99 price tag of Golf Industry Guru for a year. You can't tell me that's not going to happen. So
you look at the board members too, not to do total tangent on that, but we talked about that earlier. Your board members are filled up with most likely successful business people in their own right. And for them to admit that they do not understand the operations, or they do not, they don't have a vision for this place, is really hard. But I'm going to digress from that because I could talk about that all day. When you talk about the difference between training and culture, how do you think of that? I mean, we've talked about culture. You just talked about training. We see a lot of clubs using training as this kind of checkbox exercise. Hey, we're doing onboarding. We are doing compliance. We're doing basic tasks. Like, I trained them on how to hold a knife, so we're good. How do you help them see training as a culture building tool rather than just something that you have to get done because, it's like making the bed in the morning?
Well, I would say that training is the how and culture is the why. And so, one of the things that clubs, we talk about the employee value proposition. It's defining your employee value proposition. So when you're trying to attract people, what are they going to learn? What benefits and perks are they going to get? What kind of people are they going to work with? And what kind of fun are they going to have? And all of those things, if you focus then drill down on that, and you can tell that story, that's your why, that is the ROI of why should I work for you, right? Because just like people have a choice about what club to join, they have a choice about what club to work at. But at the same point in time, our job, we always say, you hire for attitude, you train for aptitude. So you want to hire the right people that connect with your why, that are service-minded. Now, service-minded is for frontline staff. I don't need my controller to be the most, talkative individual. I need them to be really good at numbers and make sure that we don't get, ripped off, right? If someone's going to be on a mower for 8 hours a day, they have to have certain skill sets and certain things I'm looking for them to have. And that's fine because you have goal scorers and you have goaltenders. Everyone's got a different role to play on a successful team. And so, training is certainly training, task training is required, not only from a health and safety standpoint and from a consistency standpoint, it's also required from this is why we do, this is what I need you to do. This is why you're here. So if you're not asking everyone at the counter, do they need a sleeve of balls? There's either two things are happening. I either haven't trained you or you don't give a crap. The why is to understand that your job is to offer products and services to our members and guests that's going to make their experience better and make our business better. When the staff walk through the door to start this shift, they got to be powered on. They're performing. They're in a performance. I don't care that you didn't sleep last night and you're hungover. When you walk through these doors, you are now on stage taking care of our members and guests. And so you can't give an uninterested performance.
James, I know you work with people like John Last, who we've had the pleasure of having on this podcast also, and I follow his industry report. What sort of trends are you seeing with, you talked about there was the pre-COVID era, then there's, these next 3, 4, 5 years. What do the next 5 years look like with respect to clubs and organizations, both on the public side and private side, and how they think about culture and how that either helps them attract more customers and golfers and vacationers or more members who are looking for a place to belong?
Yeah. Well, what I love about John Last and others like him is they provide data. And, whether it's Ross Liggett Matolius, whether it's John with their group, whether it's Players First and their survey processes, you cannot manage what you don't measure, right? That's the old adage saying. And so data is so critically important, number one. And we need data to make better decisions, because I believe that we are going through a significant period of change in our industry, and both from a technology standpoint, so everyone, AI and everyone is trying to understand how technology is going to change our business. There is, as you know, been never more amenities being enhanced and built and fixed, and clubs now are looking at this opportunity. Uh, you know, there's different opinions about whether or not waiting lists are going to flatten or decline or going to stay the same. We have an opportunity right now to develop relationships. So if I am a club, private, public, whatever, what I want to be doing right now is developing important connected relationships with my customer and my member that is going to sustain any kind of decline in participation that may or may not come over the next 5 or 6 or 7 years. But when you look at the world, you look at the economy, you look at, I can't get my teenagers to do the dishes in my house, let alone to take a job to do that for 8 hours a day. And so when you hear over and over again, it is difficult to get people to work in the hospitality business. It's difficult to get people to get up at 5 a.m. to go rake bunkers in the rain. Robots are not going to solve all of this stuff. And so we have an opportunity to manage our businesses, in my humble opinion, to ensure that we have the best team we possibly can have to be able to address these types of things that are going to come about. And it's the good news for me is that it's never perfected. Your service is never perfected. It's not like, we got it, we did it, we can stop now. It's like culture and training is a daily requirement. It's not just a task that you update your strategic plan once every 4 years. Creating a culture and training your people and creating relationships with your guests and finding ways to make that happen is a daily requirement.
I'm sure we could have this go. Maybe we should have another conversation, because we're getting to the end of our time. And I think the one main thing that I can take away from this conversation is you've really framed up the difference between training and culture. For me, I was typing notes over here. I was like, that's a great way of thinking about it, because the training being the how and the culture being the why, and then you add the data on top of it. I think data becomes a really overwhelming conversation for a lot of people, because data could just mean understanding if it is one or the other. To say, do I even know if the reason why someone doesn't ask if people need a sleeve of golf balls is because they don't understand it or they don't care? That knowledge between those two is data, right? And so to understand that information helps you make informed decisions, but understanding what to do with that information is a whole nother challenge. And I think that this conversation is great, because when we keep working through, how should people use AI and how should people use technology and how should people do all of this? And it just kind of comes back to, but do we even care in the first place? Let's make sure that people care. And then they understand what we really need them to do. And then we can figure out how we can integrate technology and move all that forward. But before I let you dive into all of that, I know that people are listening and they're saying, gosh, this James guy is super smart. Sounds like I need his help. Where could they find you? If they were completely new to you, how could they reach out? How could they find your information?
Sure. Well, first of all, to reach me is easy. So gurucollective.ca, cronkgroup.com, James at either one of those, James at cronkgroup.com or James at gurucollective.ca. What I want to finish off with, probably what we talked about. I was recently speaking in Asia at an event, and I was wanted to do some research to make sure that my message was the same in around the other side of the world. And I was not surprised when I did my research, and I found that it's the same issue in the rest of the world that it is every time we survey employees. There are kind of 3 things that are never enough on a scale of 9 out of 10. Okay. Like, do I like my boss? 9 out of 10. Do I like this? 9 out of 10. But there's 3 things that are always 5 out of 10, 4 out of 10, 6 out of 10. People want more communication. They want more training, and they want more recognition. And that is just human nature. I want to know more about how I contribute to this job, to this club, to the success, to why am I here? Tell me why I'm here. Help me understand why I'm here and what I'm doing. I want to learn skills to keep my interest and my mind fresh, and that I feel like I'm progressing somehow in myself and my career and my life. I want to learn things. And then I want a pat on the back. And sometimes I want a public pat on the back, and sometimes I don't. I'm a person that just needs to be a great job. That's a great job. I will finish with your listeners with my favorite trick to create an environment where you celebrate staff. Ready? It's called Boss of the Day, General Manager for the Day. And here's how it works. You have a contest with all your employees, and you ask them to come up with a great idea to improve the employee experience or the member experience or help us make more money. And then once a month, you pick a winner, a winning idea. And then their prize is they get to become boss for the day. And here's what that looks like. They show up at 11:30. They bring 3 friends with them. They play golf. They play tennis. They go to the pool. They come in afterwards. They sit at the bar on the patio. They have a drink, and then they go home, because that's what every general manager of every club does every single day, right? So that is boss for the day, and that's how it. That's something that every club should implement, in my humble opinion.
I'm sure all the general managers love hearing that's what they do every day.
There you go. Awesome.
Yeah. Appreciate your time. It's been great. I've learned a lot, actually, which is funny, because these conversations are more for you to talk about what you do, and for me to be taking notes is like, this is awesome. I really appreciate you being here and having this conversation, and I hope we can talk again.
You bet. I really appreciate both you, Derek, and yourself, Tucker, having me on. I love the work that you guys do. I think that we're in a similar business, which is helping people tell stories and helping them identify their why. And culture is all about that. So I really appreciate the opportunity and look forward to doing it again.
This conversation with James has been a great reminder that clubs creating the most lasting value aren't just managing operations, they're investing in their people. Training isn't a box to check. It's how you build a culture where every team member understands their role in creating exceptional experiences. Whether you're a private club with 400 or 500 members or a daily fee course competing for each and every round, that principle holds true. If today's conversation resonates with you, we ask that you please share it with another leader at your club or another club. Thanks again for listening. Until next time, cheers.
Thanks for listening to Clubs Made Meaningful. At Susner, we help private clubs build brands that create belonging. If this episode resonated with you, please share it with someone in your club world. And until next time, let's create something worth celebrating.